Hey, welcome back for another War Chat session, joined by Warchant's leading historian. Can we call you that also?
Yeah, absolutely.
Senior writer at warchant.com and historian. And so that we've been tapping into your expertise, Corey, through a lot of these features we've been doing, and had a lot of fun with the Warchant, where we go back and we discuss a great FSU game, and we do so with a former player. In this case, it's going to be a former coach at Florida State here shortly. And of course, we're going to be talking about the 1999 Georgia Tech game, which was it was a top 10 matchup. And, it was an offensive shootout. It was a game that just was crazy, went back and forth. Florida State never trailed, but you never felt good until they recovered that onside kick in the last couple of seconds. There was always this fear that you're one play away from losing that game.
Yeah, Joe Hamilton was a great college quarterback. Not good, like great.
Yeah.
He was really good. I think Peter Warrick was the best player on the field that day, as most days. But Joe Hamilton was the second best player on the field, and he was going up against a national championship caliber defense. And I think the stats, Gene, were something like he didn't throw an incomplete pass in the second half.
Correct.
14 out of 14 or something. What was he?
14 of 14 in the second half.
That's nuts. And they weren't just little dinks and dunks. I mean, some of them were real throws, including that last touchdown to cut it to 41-35, just a really nice fade. I remember that because it happened right in front of me. I was down on the sidelines. I had a press pass because I was at the Thomasville Times-Enterprise. But that was it was an incredible game. It was just an unbelievable game. That team, that 99 team, we've talked about it in the past, that it didn't dominate every game. In that game, the offense was really, really good, but the defense really struggled with Des White, Joe Hamilton, Joe Burns, the Thomasville kid. So there was a lot of struggles there. But as much as it was not comfortable, you always felt that even if somehow Georgia Tech took the lead, Florida State was going to come back and win the game because Florida State's offense was so dynamic. But still, what a great game. And kind of gets lost in the shuffle when you talk about that team in those games that year. I think the 99 Florida game probably gets brought up more. But that Georgia Tech game was Georgia Tech was really good. I think they were a top 10 team. They finished the season as the top 10 team.
Well, they ended up having 3 losses, so I'm not sure. They might have been just outside the top 10.
I think they might have lost their bowl game.
Yeah, they did lose their bowl game to Miami that year. But I will say the one thing, when you go back and look, and you're right about the offense, the numbers are ridiculous in this game. 945 total yards. There were 76 points scored, 10 touchdowns. Georgia Tech had 501 yards in this game. Like you said, against the top 20, really good Florida State defense in this game. So it was insane. If you doubt Georgia Tech, first of all, as you probably know, Georgia – end of the year, they play Georgia, of course, every year. They put 51 up on Georgia. And this is a ranked Georgia team. They have put 40-something up on Clemson. It wasn't the Clemson of today, but they were still a decent team, and they put 40-something beating them that year. Georgia Tech finished with the #1 overall total offense of all of college football that year. That's how good they were. And a little trivia, Corey, you know who was the #1 scoring offense that year? It was not Georgia Tech.
Well, I would assume it was Florida State.
No. It was Virginia Tech, who Florida State would play in the bowl game with Marcus.
Wow,
Nick.
okay.
So,
all right.
They played the 2 best offenses, bar none, that season, which is why probably the offense only ranked like 19 in the country, or the defense, or whatever. It would have been probably ranked a lot higher if not playing these 2 juggernaut teams.
Yeah, and you brought up putting up 50 against Clemson. It wasn't the Clemson that we know now, but still, that this Florida State team only put up 17 against Clemson that year. So it just gives you some perspective of how good this Georgia Tech offense it was. And that's why I'm really interested to talk to Mark Richt about, when he was the OC, there weren't really many games he ever went into where he's like, you know what, to be safe, we need to score 40.
Yeah.
Because he was playing with an incredible defense. Usually it was like, hey, just score 19, we're going to win this game. But in that game, it was 28-21 at the half. Like, both teams were just moving up and down the field with big play after big play. And I wondered what his mindset was going into that game about, keeping your foot on the gas or trying to slow down the game, whatever they were trying to do to help the defense when the defense never needed help at Florida State back then. But in that day, against that quarterback, they did.
Yeah, that second quarter especially was ridiculous. There were 5 total touchdowns scored in the second quarter. I think there were 7 straight touchdowns at one point scored during this game. I mean, you didn't see that. You saw that actually some of those late 2000s really bad defense. I think they had another Georgia Tech game. What year was that? 2009, Corey, when Georgia Tech, Florida State had another shootout. But it was 2 teams that had pretty good offenses and really bad defenses.
Right.
But this was different. These were 2 really good teams that had solid defenses, but just the offenses were that good.
Yeah, Florida State had NFL talent all over its defense and a Hall of Fame coordinator. But Ralph Friedgen was Ralph Friedgen the head coach or the OC? I think he was the OC.
I think he was the OC at the time.
He was the OC. He devised a great game plan for Mickey. And again, he rode Joe Hamilton, who was incredible, moving around in the pocket. He was kind of like Charlie Ward, not a blazer running, but so hard to sack, with really good touch. Got a cup of coffee in the NFL. I don't know, people that are watching this may not remember Joe Hamilton. Kind of gets lost a little bit when you talk about ACC greats, but for those 2 years, especially that last year in '99, he was about as good as it gets.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. And you mentioned obviously Peter Warrick had a big game, 142 yards receiving, had a rushing touchdown. I want to ask Mark Richt. He was went out of the Wildcat a couple times about when he would decide to do put him back there. I think Dan Kendra got back there a couple times in short yardage situations, and then all lost in the shuffle a little bit. Travis Minor had a big game, ran very effectively, 122 yards in this game. And I do want to ask Mark Richt about this. I don't know if you remember this, Corey. It's one of your guys, so I think you probably remember this. I thought the best play of the game, or at least the most exciting play of the game, did not come from Peter Warrick. It came from somebody else on this team. Do you know who that is?
Oh, is it Jeff Chaney?
Jeff Chaney. That screen pass he took at the end of the half was ridiculous.
Yeah, great play. He broke like 4 tackles, 5 tackles. Again, and he wasn't even the guy. Travis Minor, who always showed up in big games for the most part. Travis Minor would always seem to have over 100 yards when they needed him in big games. And, Jeff Chaney was a great fallback option as a number 2 guy, fallback option. And I also remember we brought this up later on in the year when we talked to Menace about the '99 Florida game, is I'm almost positive on that first drive, Gene, on the very first drive, they had 3 or 4 different quarterbacks. They had. I think you're right, because they had Warrick on the touchdown, and I think Dan Kendra got in short yardage situations, and obviously had Winky back there as well. So it's another one. They just love doing that. And I think that was Kendra. Kendra caught a touchdown pass.
He did.
And I think that was probably maybe the first.
No, it was his first start, because I went back and one of the write-ups I saw might have been the Democrat of whatever the press release was or whatever it was. But they said Dan Kendra got his first start at fullback.
No, I was wondering if that was his first career touchdown.
Oh, yeah. It was his first start.
He might have scored one rushing as a quarterback the year before.
He did, because he substituted for Winky, I think, was it 98 in the Wake Forest game that he came in
maybe
quarterback. So I think he scored a touchdown.
Or 90, whatever it was. But 97 maybe.
Or 97, yeah.
He was hurt for 98. I do think he scored touchdowns. But just a lot of talent on that field, obviously offensively. Atrus Bell makes a big catch. Peter Warrick is just, and that's when the only way he was going to lose the Heisman is the way he lost the Heisman. Yeah. Either getting injured or what happened at Dillard's, because that game, it was like him playing with sophomores in high school. Like every catch he made, the run he made on 3rd and 6. It's like, he's probably not going to throw it on 3rd and 6 out of the shotgun. But still, he's so hard to tackle. He runs in for a 16-yard score. He has that incredible catch over the middle where he stops, starts, does his Peter Warrick thing, and then goes all the way across the field. Just a remarkable athlete. And that was also early on in the season. Wasn't it the second game of the season?
Second game.
So they were still working out some of the kinks because they didn't play all that well against Louisiana Tech. And, in fact, I think Bobby Bowden's quote after that game was, I thought I had a bunch of great players on my team, but it turns out I might just have one great player on my team. Talking about Peter Warrick.
Yeah, I don't remember that quote, but I remember it was close until Warrick had that crazy reverse run that everybody's seen the highlight.
It was 7-3 with 20 seconds left in the first half. And I think I think that game the offense played more like the Florida State offense we were expecting, with a bunch of different weapons. But still, you could tell that, okay, we got number 9 for his senior year. We are going to ride him as much as humanly possible this season because he is an all-time talent.
Yeah, good stuff. So we're going to bring him on here in a little bit, the offensive coordinator for Florida State at the time, Mark Richt. He'll be joining us here in a minute with this session of War Chat. Welcome back to War Chat on warchant.com. That's hard to say. Right now we're talking about the 1999 season and that Georgia Tech, that epic back and forth struggle that went with these two great teams back then. And we're joined by the then offensive coordinator, Mark Richt, a long time with Bobby Bowden, of course, then head coach forever at University of Georgia and then Miami, and now serving as an analyst for the ACC network. Mark, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you joining us today.
It's good to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Coach, we're going to talk about this game. First of all, I want to just ask about that 99 season. You had to know going in after 98, you had Chris back, you had Pete back. Travis Minor. You had all this talent, obviously great defense too. You guys had to feel really good going into this season.
Yeah, we did. And I remember Peter Warrick way back when Pete was a true freshman. I think he pulled a hamstring in camp, and he missed a lot of camp. And he might have even missed the first game or so. And we wanted to play the kid once he was healthy, and he kept begging for a red shirt. You know, he's like, "I want a red shirt." I said, "Son, you're not going to stay here 5 years." No. And then he said, "Coach, I promise I'll stay the whole time." And, of course, not catching many balls in that national championship game the year before probably helped him come back to try to win one. But that was huge just to – you don't remember the little things about it way back when they were first freshmen, but that was the big deal back then that he decided to stay for that last season.
When he decides to stay, which today, 22 years later, just seems almost unfathomable, that a kid that had already been in college 4 years that was maybe the best player in the country at the end of the 98 season decides to stay and turn down that money. Did you go into the offseason saying we're going to change the offense? I mean, you got the ball to him a ton anyway in 98. Did you make any tweaks to the offense going into 99 about how to get him
Not really, because really all season long in 98 even, just our system, the way it worked, you're going to throw it to who was open, basically. You had your progression of reads, and he always got his share, so we never really thought about it. But after that national championship game, you just sitting there going, it didn't work out the way we hoped it would, or the way it had been working out all season long. And we knew that we had to have more plays that we knew for certain would get him the ball. It was just a handful of things that made sure he got it. But for the most part, we still ran what we had run the year before, and he was making plays like he had in 98. So, but we just couldn't let another national championship game go by and not make sure he got it in his hands.
Right.
Now, Mark, talking about this 1999 Georgia Tech game, it was the second game of the season. You just beat Louisiana Tech. Little struggles early on, got off to a slow start, and then Pete had that crazy run, and you guys rolled that one. And you're playing Georgia Tech. Now, this is a top 10 Georgia Tech team. Joey Hamilton is their quarterback. You guys had to know going in, you're going to have to score a few points to beat these guys. I mean, as an offensive coordinator, especially when this thing is going and both teams are scoring, what is it? Do you call a little different when you know you're going to be in a little bit of a shootout potentially?
Well, first of all, you always, as offensive coordinator, you like to sneak a peek at the other team's offense. You're always going to look at their defense, obviously, but when you go against the offense that is doing the things that Georgia Tech was doing with Hamilton, you wanted to see what was going on. And, Ralph Friedgen was the offensive coordinator at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And that they were so their execution was as good or better than any offensive team I've seen in my whole career to that point. Just really impressed with them. And, most of the time, we didn't have to score 50 a game to win. We didn't have to score 40 a game to win. We didn't have to score 30 a game to win, or 20 a game sometimes.
Right.
So it's very rare that we had to score that many points to win a game because our defense was so good. But as far as trying to score more because we were playing Georgia Tech, no, because we try to score every time we touch the ball. Period. That's just how we function. But we knew it was going to be a battle. And I'll say this: I wouldn't have been shocked if our defense shut them down either, because they were that good that year.
So when the game starts, Mark, I think both teams punt to start off the game, I think. But then your first touchdown, it's 3rd and 6. You're at their 16-yard line, and you put Peter Warrick in the shotgun. How much did you plan on using that? I don't even know about that game, but just that season in particular, because we all remember it in Florida too later in the year. How much was that kind of like a wild card in your back pocket? And is there any chance at all he's looking to throw the ball? Or is it a straight quarterback draw?
That was a QB run. I think it might have been a QB sweep. And then he might have hit the brakes and started one way, hit the brakes, and ran reverse to himself, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But, when Winky the year before, I think the year before is when he broke his neck.
Yeah.
And missed a lot of the season. And when he came back, we knew if we were going to have any kind of quarterback run, there's going to have to be somebody besides him. Even quarterback sneak is going to be Marcus Outson coming in the game. And, Peter Warrick, we had a way for him to get it. Was Dan Kendra still there at the time?
Yeah, Kendra was there too, yeah.
So I think we had a little something for Kendra, a little something for Housen, and a little something for Peter at the QB position, just to give us, a little bit of an extra. You get extra blockers when your quarterback can run, and it doesn't have to be your quarterback necessarily your starter. It could be guys that are athletic and didn't want to put Winky at a risk of taking a shot.
Is a lot of that with Peter Warrick when you're coaching someone like that? Jimbo used to say this all the time too. It's an axiom with all coaches. You can't coach every yard out of someone. Some of it's God-given. Yeah. They're just going to people miss. So your job as a coach is just to get him into space, like with one-on-one on a linebacker, and say, Peter, do what you do?
Yeah, you hope to do that all the time.
Right.
But, it's just like going back to that Louisiana Tech game, that wild run he had. I'm up in the box. And Coach Bound, he wanted to run that. He wanted to run that reverse. And he kept asking me, is it there? Is it there? Every time you toss a sweep, you look at the backside of the defense and see if they're chasing the play or if somebody's holding back waiting for the reverse. And every single time they had somebody waiting there.
Right.
And I kept saying, it's not there. It's not there. And sure enough, Coach just called it anyway, right? Well, Pete comes around the corner on the reverse, and there's somebody waiting for him, but the problem, that they had is he dodged about 10 guys twice.
Yeah.
That play and scored a touchdown. Coach Bound said, I still got it. So, that plays a perfect example of scheme over giving it to the right dude.
Mm-hmm.
Pete was that guy.
So, Mark, in this game, I think it's 7-7 going to the second quarter, and then all heck breaks loose. 5 touchdowns scored in the second quarter. I think you scored a touchdown on every single drive. I think at one point between then and the third quarter, 7 straight touchdowns were scored in this game. When you're an offensive coordinator, are you feeling like you're in the zone, or what do you feel like when you're in these runs?
Right.
Just everything's executing, everything's going perfectly.
Most of the time when you're scoring like that, you're not having to come off a script very much. And what I mean by that is, you're going to have certain plays you're going to run in the green zone, which is between the 20 and the 20 on the first and second down. And then you're going to have your third and short, third and medium, third and long calls. You got your red zone calls. You got your goal line calls that you practice all week against the things you think you'll see, and you script them on your call sheet. And, if you could stay on script, you do it. And so usually you're just calling things that you thought were going to be good. The defense is doing what you thought they would do. And as you mentioned, your offense is blocking well and executing well, throwing and catching well, and making good decisions at the quarterback position. And you can have the greatest game plan in the world, and if guys are missing assignments or dropping balls that are wide open on a 3rd and 4, it's hard to keep moving the ball. But everybody was doing their job, and everybody was making plays.
I got to bring this up, Mark. So the second touchdown is a play-action fake where Winky hits Kendra, the fullback, who snuck out in the middle of the end zone.
Yes.
I went to Georgia. I'm a Georgia grad.
Yes.
It certainly looks an awful familiar to the pass to Haynes from Dave Green. Is it the same play that you beat Tennessee with?
Yes.
Okay.
The exact same play. We had run – whoever was the fullback, we would call pass 44 Haynes.
Or Kendra.
The fullback at Georgia.
Got it.
Well, Kendra's nickname was Joey. It just was a term he used to use. Dan would say, okay, Joey, kind of a sarcastic thing. So we started calling him Joey. So I think that play was called pass 44 Joey. But the thing about that play is when you get down in that red zone and you get a split safety look or a 2 safety look, which a lot of people play quarters down there, so there's 4 across. So there's no middle safety. So you get in the I formation in a 3 receiver set, there's a lot of times we'll just run an isolation play where the fullback blocks the linebacker, and then you give the ball to the back and he makes his way through there. Well, when a fullback comes downhill at a linebacker, that linebacker is getting ready to take on that block.
Mm-hmm.
And when he does that, the fullback just slips by him vertically past him and is wide open in the end zone because there's nobody back team, and nobody expects the third receiver to be a fullback out of the backfield, especially off of that play pass. So, but yeah, that was exactly what that play was.
It's pretty cool, I think, for Kendra, who came in, as you know, obviously, I'm not telling you anything, as like the number one player in the country, the hotshot quarterback, but then switching to fullback, which is such a non-glamour position, and to excel at it to the point that he started on a national championship team. That kind of says a lot about that kid to make that sacrifice and that switch.
Well, you know, his body type, as we all know, he was a freak of nature as a freshman. You know, 240 pounds, whatever he was, leg pressing all the weight in the world. I mean, he just was in the weight room all the time and eating all kind of exotic food to you know, be what he wanted to be. But you know, he made that switch. He was definitely strong enough, faster. The guy ran a 4.5. Yeah, benched over however many pounds when he got there. But you know, he was tough and he was smart enough to do it, and he was humble enough to do it. Right. You know, but I'll say this too. You know, when Winky came in, we were getting ready to get was it Drew Henson? If you remember the kid that ended up going to Michigan, we were about to get that kid. I mean, his dad, his son were all fired up, and they're getting ready to make a visit, and I think just commit to Florida State. Well, right in the middle of that, Winky decides he wants to play football again. He calls Coach Bound. Coach Bound tells me, hey, Winky wants to come back. I told him he could come back. I said, can I at least talk to him before he comes back? Because I'm about to get this Henson kid. And I don't want to lose him. And Winky decided after about a month he don't like it. Right. He changes his mind. I mean, so I'm talking to Winky, and I start trying to scare him off with the fact that we got Dan Kendra, you know, who was National Player of the Year, and Coach Bowden coached his son, and Ann Bowden, Miss Bowden, gave Dan Kendra a gift when he was a little baby in the crib in West Virginia. Right. You know, it was like, and then Winky, classic Winky, he goes, hey, Coach, let me ask you one question. I go, what's that? He goes, if I'm the best one, will I start? I said, yeah. He goes, I'm coming. And Drew Henson didn't come.
Yeah, Drew Henson went to Michigan. That's right.
We lost Drew right there, but it was worth it.
It worked out for you guys.
Yeah, he did all right. Coach, the last play of the half it's tied up. There's about a minute and a half left. You guys put Jeff Chaney. Jeff Chaney goes in. You screen play to him, and he makes maybe the best play of the game. Everyone's talking about Winky and Travis Minor and all these great players you had, but he makes an unbelievable play to get to the end zone right before the end of the half. And that guy, you coach Warrick Dunn, you had Minor, some of these great running backs, but it seemed like when you would call on him to come off the bench, he just always seemed to make big plays for you.
He did. I got a lot of respect for that kid. Just a tough, hard-nosed guy. Was a great special teams guy. Was very unselfish. He could have easily been the lead back, but he was in the backfield with some pretty special players. But you're right. You could think of a handful of times where he got the ball when it counted the most, and he made the most of it. He was a special player for sure.
And Gene talked about it just a second ago, but earlier in that half, Minor had a touchdown run too. And Travis came in. He came from the same school as Warrick Dunn. He was, again, it was Florida State in the 90s. He was a big-time recruit. He had a really good career, but he didn't put up huge numbers each season. But it seemed like in every big game, every close game, that kid would put up 120 yards. When you guys needed Travis Minor, because you were blowing people out by 40 and 50 points, he didn't need to get 20 carries a game. But when he did get his 20 or 25 carries a game, it seemed like he always produced.
He did, and you made a perfect point. We were beating teams by such a great margin a lot of times that sometimes we'd play one series in the third quarter with the starting unit and then start substituting after that point. But you're right, there were certain games where they got to play the full 4 quarters, and Minor was built for that. Very tough, very great condition, super ball security. The guy rarely fumbled, if any, always caught the ball in the backfield well. Just a solid, tough, hard-nosed football player that was super reliable.
So, Mark, you're up a touchdown going at halftime. First drive, you go down, again, Chris Winky It's Peter Warrick. You guys up 2 touchdowns. They answer. Gets a little bit more defensive at that point. And you guys kick a couple field goals with Janikowski, get a buffer. What was it like as a coach where you've got a guy in a Janikowski? Now, you ran the gambit with kickers when you were at Florida State.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really good ones.
No doubt.
And you had ones that, let's just say, weren't as good. But, I mean, to have a guy like that, I mean, you have to change your – again, you get in the red zone, it's a little different play calling, especially when you're ahead, isn't there?
Right. Well, I love Janikowski. One of my duties at Florida State during the kicking periods was to be with the holder and the snapper and the field goal guy, just working on the snap and the hold more so than the kick. But, so I'm in charge of Janikowski too during that drill time. And just to watch him work and to listen to the sound of the ball off of his foot. It was like just a booming sound every time he hit it. And but you also got to hear him chirping, he's always talking. And he was the funniest kid. One time he came to me after that period and said, what period do we do a field goal in practice? Because, pre-practice you do your kicking. And then some days on, like Thursdays, you'll have your 2-minute drill and end up with a kick. So he's like, how much time do I have basically between now and the time I'm going to kick at the end of practice? And he goes, I go, why are you asking that? He goes, Coach, I want to go to Potbelly's and shoot some pool. So we went to Potbelly's and have a beer and shoot some pool, and they come back and
kick.
Kick a field goal. I mean, that was typical Janikowski. But no, he was great. We all know that, knocking it out of the end zone for the defense on kickoffs. And there's one time, I know it's a different game, but talking about Janikowski, my fondest memory of Janikowski, we were playing Florida one game. It might have been the same year. I don't even know.
Yeah, it was.
And we're getting ready to kick a field goal, but I was stammering enough to where we got to delay a game. He kicks it through from about 50 or 40. I don't know what it was, 43, 44, whatever it was. And he makes it, but it was delay a game. So we got moved back 5 yards, and we were kick it again with him. And then so I'm like, oh, geez, I just screwed up by not getting field goal called quick enough. And then he nails the second one and keeps me from having to answer those tough questions after the game.
He also did the Gator chomp afterwards. Because it was
in-game
4-yard kick.
Right. I love that guy.
Did you guys know? Because in that game, he kicks a 45 and a 46-yarder in the Georgia Tech game. Did you guys know coming in? I know he was a hot shot recruit, but what did y'all know about him when he came onto the team, other than he had a good leg?
Who was the kid we had before him that had
Grammatica, right? Was it
so we got Grammatica.
Yeah,
Grammatica was a great kicker.
Yeah,
but then Janikowski, I think Billy Sexton came back from a recruiting trip and said, Coach, this guy is unbelievable. We already had Grammatica. And so Coach was like, okay, let's bring him in or see if he's interested or whatever it was. I don't know if Coach Bowden needed to see tape of it or what. Long story short, he was so good that we signed another kicker when we already had a kicker.
Right, a good kicker.
We usually sign one every 3 or 4 years, if that.
Yeah.
But that's how good he was.
So you guys went on to you win this game, but you score late, but then Georgia Tech does. Not surprised, Joey Hamilton drove them down right at the very end to make it a 6-point game, and you guys really didn't have that secured to the onside kick. But did you have any idea at the time? I mean, you said they were good. If you go back and look at the final stats for 1999, Georgia Tech ended up with the #1 total offense in all of college football. So they were really good. So, I mean, that had to be a little nerve-wracking that whole game. You've got this great team, and this Georgia Tech team just will not go away. They keep fighting back.
No, you're right. And as I said when we started, when I watched their tape, you could see why they were the best in the country. They were so well coached and executed so well. It was crazy. And Joey was gifted, runner, passer, just a playmaker nonstop. But, when you get in games like that, I don't know if it's getting in the zone or whatever it is, but you kind of you get locked in, you get your mindset going, and you stay focused, just totally focused on your job, and you can't really sit there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when a game was over and like the next day, if you recorded it on TV or even in the summertime, you're on the elliptical and you're watching a game of the year before, and you start feeling the emotion of the game like a fan does, and you just don't feel it that way as a coach. Or at least I didn't. I always try to stay so focused that I could make good decisions and not get too emotionally involved in them.
Did you get nervous?
Well, going into game, like the night before, I would get to where I just couldn't sleep. The worst part of getting ready for the game is after pregame warm-up, you go back in the locker room for about 20 minutes. That's the longest 20 minutes of a coach's life, is just sitting there waiting to get back out on the field again and go. But I don't know if it was, I definitely had emotion that, I don't think I had fear, but you had, I guess anxiety. I don't know if that's anxiety is the right word or not, but you got the butterflies for sure.
How much – I remember asking Coach Bowden this in 2009 when he was retiring, like what he missed the most about being a play caller, because he was as innovative as it could get back when he was building the program. He was a high flyer football guy. And I wanted to ask you the same thing. How much did you miss or miss now just the chess match of calling plays in setting things up for something else? That's got to be fun as an OC. I know there's more pressure even as a head coach, but as an OC, just calling plays and trying to set something up has to be, when you do it right, has to feel unbelievable.
Well, the best job I had was 92 and 93 when Brad Scott was the coordinator, but I was able to call the plays. So I'm coaching QBs and calling plays. So that was a fun time, not to have the responsibility of the entire offense at practice and all these types of things and organization and all that kind of thing. But then, becoming the coordinator certainly gave you a little bit more control on what happened preparation-wise with the input of the staff. It's always a group effort. But when you become head coach and you try to call the plays and be the offensive coordinator, be the game planner, you can do it, but it for me personally, it wore me out, As much as I loved it, it wore me out. But as much as it wore me out, I missed it that much, because when I went back to Miami, I went back to calling plays because I missed it.
Right.
And it's a catch-22. If you're just a coordinator nowadays with the kind of money they're making, it's probably the best job in college football.
Sure. The reason I asked that, Gene, and this will be one of my last question. But you talked about out with Winky's neck. Y'all wouldn't do QB sneaks with him. So you would put Marcus Outzen in the game typically to do a QB sneak. In that national championship game against Virginia Tech, y'all have a very critical 4th and short on the other side of the field. And you put Outzen in the game, and everybody in the world knows it's going to be a QB sneak. Instead, you do a toss sweep to Travis Minor and get like 12 yards. It's almost as if, Mark, you had been setting up that play for the entire season. Did you know going into that game? I know we're talking about Georgia Tech, but I wanted to ask about that specific play. If it's 4th and short, we're doing a toss sweep. We haven't done it all season. Right.
Well, you do your self-scout. And, when you look at yourself and say, what does the defense see? Well, they saw every time Outzen was in the game with 3rd and inches or 4th and inches, it's a sneak.
Yeah.
Period. And that's what it was. It was 4th and less than a yard, I think.
Yeah.
And so we said, and we've seen them when they think the sneak's coming, the whole defense would crash in every gap and just try to root you out of there, And so we said, if we get this situation, then we're gonna toss this thing. We put a guy in motion to secure the edge and tossed it to him, thinking everybody was going to crash on that situation, and they did, by the grace of God. You never know for sure what's going to happen. And I think he got hit out of bounds late, another 15 yards on top of it. But that might have been the turning point of that ball game, to know, or at least to believe, that that's what was going to happen.
Hey, Mark, and it's funny that Corey asked that. I was going to bring that up too, that play, because I remember I actually talked to you after part of the interview, then after that national championship, and I said, was that your best call in the game? And I don't know if you remember this, but you told me there was one of the passes to Dugans. You said actually the way you had that one set up, you thought that was actually a better play call from you. And I don't know if you remember that or what that play was.
Yeah, I think it was a play where Ron was the wide receiver split into the boundary. And we put the running back in motion outside of Ron to make him the widest receiver. And what we were trying to do is get the corner to bump out to play the widest guy and the linebacker to match up on Dugans and be able to throw a little vertical pass to him, inside lane vertical pass. But what happened was when the back went in motion, the corner did what I thought he would do, but the linebacker was thinking that's my guy, so he went out there too. So both the cornerback and the linebacker went with the running back, and then Dugans, no one covered Dugans. And it was just an easy throw and catch right there.
Speaking of Dugans, and this is my last question. In that game against Georgia Tech that we were talking about, he had 0 catches. Snoop Menace had 0 catches. Now, we all know what Snoop did the next year when he caught everything under the sun. How did you get these guys? I'm not saying you particular, but why were they so unselfish? You had All-American type caliber receivers that would come to Florida State to maybe get in 20 plays a game at times, even in their sophomores or juniors or senior years. And Dugans has a whole game without a catch. How did you keep them happy? How did they stay happy? How did they stay engaged?
Well, they liked winning. They liked everybody bought it. You know, John Eason, I guess, was John Eason the coach at the time. I guess he left after '93.
Yeah, that's
then
right.
Jeff Bowden came in.
Right.
But the bottom line was, you know, the whole team was built around being unselfish. You know, the way we trained in the offseason, the mat drills, no one got away with not doing mat drills. The only guy might have was Deion Sanders because he played 3 sports.
Right.
But if he was available, he was in there. And so everybody worked. And everybody, like if you're a receiver, if you didn't block, you didn't play. That was it. And everybody knew that. And so they also knew our system was set up to where we're going to take the open guy. We're not going to force it to a certain guy. And, you know, obviously, you know, we needed to do a little better job of getting it to Pete with that philosophy after that national championship game. But for the most part, they knew any day might be their game. There was games Ron had, you know, 10 catches.
Yeah.
You know, and then, of course, he got his share in the national championship game, a couple TDs and a few other catches in that game. But the guys just liked winning. They liked each other, and they were happy for the other guys' success.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for, as always, being very gracious with your time. I don't know if you remember back, my first interview with an on-the-field coach was you back in 1998. So here we are.
How about that?
22 years later, still talking, doing the same thing. And I encourage all the FSU fans listening to go ahead and watch Mark on ACC Network, and along with EJ Manuel, another Florida State guy. We had EJ on a few weeks ago too.
Yeah, he does a great job.
He does. He's a great guy too. All right. Well, appreciate it. Everybody joining us on Warchant. Mark, Rick, thank you again. And good luck this season. Look forward. Hopefully we'll be seeing you breaking down football games this fall if all goes well. Cross our fingers.
I hope so.
Thank
God
you, Mark.
bless. We'll see you
Thank
guys.
you, Mark.